I thought I was bad at introductions. Good morning, everyone. Look, it's great to be here, or be back here. Obviously spoke for the first time here last year, which I think was the first time we had this. Yep, so good to be here. I'd like to, obviously thank Field Days for putting this together, the advocacy hub, for you all to farmers to be able to come in and talk to people that are advocating on your behalf, and great to see this is happening. I also want to acknowledge Federated Farmers and the various other farmer-led organisations that are here that tirelessly advocate for the sector. I, of course, am no stranger to that work. I know how important it is, whether it's at a regional level, and often it is at that regional level that advocacy is most important, because sometimes, whilst there are the big picture issues that everyone gets can take up the headlines, sometimes it's those small local issues that really do people's heads in and really get farmers frustrated and can make a hell of a lot of cost to the farmer. Goes without saying, this government is fully committed to back you by reducing red tape, cutting those unnecessary costs, and strengthening the frontline support. When I first spoke here last year, probably the big issue everyone was facing was interest rates and the costs that was putting on a lot of businesses. Now, that was Wellington's fault. We had a situation where government had effectively spent way too much money on stuff that did not drive productivity, and that sort of scenario only leads to one thing, and it's inflation. And the only way to control inflation is through interest rates. Now, by being very strong on our ability to cut back that spending, to make sure that the spending that is of high value, that has brought interest rates down, and that has had a dramatic impact for every farm business, or every business in the country. Because, make no mistake, you do need to borrow. You do have to get capital from elsewhere to make the investments you need in farm to operate, to go ahead. And the more that the interest rates are up, that just strangles businesses, and it strangles homeowners, it strangles everyone, it strangles the economy. So that has been a key function of this last year. Also, we've made a lot of progress on red tape. We've started delivering on our promise to fix the Resource Management Act. The intent is that we should have something out by September this year, hopefully. We'll touch and go, but it is a hell of a lot of work that has been put in place to have something there that will deliver a game changer, because make no bones about it, we do need a game changer in this space. We can't keep tinkering with the old broken system. We need a new system. We've also amended the winter grazing rules over the last year and fixed the stock exclusion rules, which again would have added quite a lot of costs to farmers, probably for very little in the way of gain. We've paused the rollout of freshwater farm plans while we make improvements to those to ensure that they're more affordable, they're more targeted, they're focusing on what we need them to focus on, which is about improving water quality. And I've seen results from where these have been implemented at a catchment level, and it is a much better system of having farmers engage with, here are the activities I need to be undertaking to manage critical source on my farm, rather than a one-size-fits-all blunt approach from Wellington. Now, right now we're consulting on a package of proposals that are aimed at streamlining and removing regulations that are holding the primary sector back. Most critically, in my opinion, we're consulting on the changes to a number of national direction packages, including MPS freshwater. Now, if I take my minister hat on and put on my staunch ACT Party hat, I think we need to be bold in that. And by being bold, I mean that we need to remove Te Mana o Te Wai. I look at all the challenges everyone's talking about, and I know there's some of you want to focus on Paris Accord, looking at you, Groundswell, obviously. But you know, it's still an issue. Yeah, we don't want unworkable targets. We don't want to be paying the most carbon efficient farmers in the world to be paying taxes. But if I look at the whole range of policies out there at the moment, what scares me the most, it is around that resource management place, and in particular freshwater rules. And we need to have clarity. We need to have, just focus on what we need to be focusing on. And we don't need unambiguous spiritual concepts, which I think ultimately will end up with, in effect, co-governance and be it policy and potentially consenting as well. So I look at that area and I feel like that is the most critical thing that we need to be focusing on, and we need to be bold. There will be noise in this, and I implore you all as advocates for the rural community and as farmers to make sure your voices are heard in that. Make sure that people understand the goals and ambitions you've got in terms of improving water quality, but the challenges that having sort of one-size-fits-all approach from Wellington is going to play in being able to achieve that. I feel the other, whilst I'm being staunch ACT Party MP, not being a minister for a minute, I also want to give a shout out to the Regulatory Standards Bill. Now I imagine most of you are undoubtedly thinking, oh my God, what a boring sounding bill, and it probably would sound like a boring sounding bill to anyone but a complete politics nerd. However, real simply, if this bill had have been around in my 3 years as the Fed's president, it would have made my life so much easier, because the purpose of this bill is to restrain the regulatory activities that government undertakes. We think about how government can take from us in terms of a fiscal sense with taxation, and there's lots of rules and regulations around, we're trying to make sure government thinks smart about that. But in the regulatory sense, they can take just as much, if not more, in terms of removing our property rights to be able to do stuff through regulations, being able to hinder and hamper our ability to conduct business. And that is what the Regulatory Standards Bill is focused on. It is about ensuring that government only intrudes into our lives where there is a proven problem that needs a solution, and the solution is the most appropriate. And basically, if politicians can, of course, ignore all that, but it shines a spotlight on it. Now, great example I feel of, you may think, oh, whoopity-doo, it shined a spotlight, what's that going to change? If I go back to the winter grazing rules when they first came out, and it was probably 2 days after they came out, Bernadette Hunt from Feds Southland appeared on the Mike, well, didn't appear, but was heard on the Mike Hosking breakfast show and was able to articulate how dumb some of these rules were. And that's what's shining a spotlight on it, making it clear to the public how stupid a rule may be. And those rules got changed within 2 days of that happening, or even a day. Now that tells you there's something broken with our regulatory system. If something can get all the way through Cabinet, be signed off, and then the moment it gets made public, someone's able to point out quite simply how stupid it is, that should tell you we are missing checks and balances. And so that's what this bill aims to do, is put checks and balances in place, but also ensure that you get compensation for when those regulatory takings occur of your property rights. So again, it's a bill that lots of people are upset about it. They think it's going to take away their ability to say no to what you want to do and curtail politicians' rights to be able to have brain farts and do whatever they want to do, which is a good thing. So we want to be able to constrain that. And so again, I would encourage you, make your voices heard on that. All right, I better get back on track and go back to being a minister. Just sort of highlight a couple of other things that I think is going on that are relevant for farming. In the health and safety space, Brooke is leading some reforms to get rid of the over-compliance that we have, reduce the paperwork and make WorkSafe a lot more helpful. I think in the past we've had a situation where basically everything has become overly risk adverse, and there is a law of diminishing marginal returns in everything. And you can go to a point where you're just so far risk averse that you're actually stopping smart stuff to happen, and also creating situations that, quite frankly, are in some cases less safe. I look at alterations that have been made to my cowshed recently to make it more safe. In fact, I felt more unsafe by the fact there's this kick bar all the way around it, and I have to bend down to be able to apply dry cow therapy. And that sort of made me think, actually, everyone's trying to make everything safer, and actually sometimes all this safety can make things a lot more unsafe when you just, you let people rely on their innate knowledge and their ability. Actually, people can use their brains and do things in a smart manner. We're also keen to empower farmers on the conservation front. I feel like too often we're sort of can be ridiculed or put down as not caring about the biodiversity on our farms. And I look back over my career in agriculture and the change that has occurred amongst farmers in being just wanting to highlight the brilliant work that they are doing on their farms with restoring native bush biodiversity. So just to tease it, we'll be making an announcement tomorrow around how there will be support for this biodiversity work at the Beef and Lamb site, 11 a.m. tomorrow. So do encourage you all to come along if you want to find out more. And also, just obviously in this year's budget we had 20% funding increase for wilding pines. I've, as role as Biosecurity Minister, I've certainly seen the challenges that this pest creates, particularly down south, and the need, of all of the issues within the biosecurity portfolio. This is the one we have the ability to eradicate. We just don't quite have the money. And so by being able to secure enough more and more funding to be able to get on top of it, I think it is something that we can solve, much like we have nearly got there with TB, and we also want to carry on with that TB work to ensure that we do get on top of TB. And I guess investment boost from this year's budget, another really important announcement to help drive investment in on-farm productivity and improvements. To be able, you know from your own times on farm where you've got the ability to put new technology in, new equipment, you generate a lot more productivity from your land. It just boosts the entire economy. I have seen some really funny memes of fishing boats with pond stirrers on the back. So I'm not sure if anyone's actually selling those, but who knows? Knowing farmers, I'm sure there will be some interesting claims put out there, but I would not encourage that, of course. Everyone should be truly and honest in doing this. So look, just finally, really great to be here. This government is committed to backing the success of farmers. I want to thank Fed Farmers and many of you here for the work you're doing, and happy to take any questions.